miles from home when the car gave up the ghost. But to be honest, I was surprised we made it as far as we did. My old Nissan had been on life support for the better part of the last decade. Amazon, in Kindle, on paperback, in hardcover, and finally, after months of waiting, on Audible. That's right, you can now get Volume 3 on Audible. Links in the description down below. And always get new stuff from Tales from the Gas Station as well as new announcements. Miles from home when the car gave up the ghost. But to be honest, I was surprised we made it as far as we did. My old Nissan had been on life support for the better part of the last decade. Now that it was dead, I almost felt relief. Like the machine could finally be at peace in the great afterlife parking lot in the sky. Of course, that relief was easily outweighed by the newfound panic of being stranded in the middle of an unfamiliar nowhere. Jerry was under the hood doing everything short of dark magic to get the engine running again, while I paced the road with a cell phone over my head, hoping for a single hour of connectivity and feeling about as useful as male nipples.
Oh.
This certainly wasn't the highlight of our cross-country road trip, but it wasn't the worst moment either. That particular honor fell upon the roadside marsupial. But to be fair, this was taking my mind off of all those things I'd left back home, which was the entire purpose of this surprise vacation, after all. That's what my friends called it. A surprise vacation. Their delicate phrasing conjured a much kinder image of what turned out to be a low-key kidnapping. I got home from my overnight shift to find them all waiting for me in my living room, intervention style. My roommate, Jerry, the mastermind behind it all, had 2 go bags waiting by the front door and a map plotting our impending road trip to see the Pacific Ocean for the first time in my life. Jerry had been prone to these spontaneous, well-intended but highly irresponsible gestures for as long as I'd known him. At least, this time, he didn't try to gift me a stray animal he found. Normally I would simply say, thanks, and shut it down before things got out of hand. But I wasn't in the proper headspace to fight back. I'd just gone through what can only be described as a traumatic event. Some people close to me died, and there was a major misunderstanding with the new sheriff, but that's probably a story best saved for another day. Suffice to say, my friends saw that I was going through a rough patch, and thought it would be good medicine to get me far away from everything for a few days. They made sure my shifts at the gas station were covered until the end of the week, just long enough for things to settle down and go back to normal. I couldn't blame them for not understanding what was really going on. Hell, I only got a tenuous grasp on it myself, but the doctors assured me everything would be fine now, just as long as I stuck to the plan and took my medicine. After a few long days filled with tourist traps, roadside attractions, cheap motels, and car farts, it looked like we'd finally reached the end of our adventure. We were a few states shy of the West Coast, but low on money and even lower on time. This trip was as close to a success as we were likely to get. The car's breakdown was the final straw. I decided to give Jerry a few more seconds of vacation before breaking the news to him, which is why I was taking so long looking for cell service when I knew there was none to be found way out here. When I got back to the car, Jerry popped his head out from under the hood and said, "Okay, try the engine now." I turned the key to the sound of stubborn silence. "Nada," I announced. "Really? Fuck a doodle. I bypassed the engine switch. It's not the battery, the starter. Spark plugs are good, fuses are good, wiper blades are new, blinker fluid is full. Maybe it's out of gas," I offered, exhausting the full extent of my vehicular knowledge. "No, it's got a half a tank." He slammed the hood shut and said, "Well, I'm gonna make friends with the tree. When I get back, I'll start taking the engine apart. In the meantime, you should build a fire and find something to cook. I might be here a while." "That plan isn't gonna work." "Relax, dude. It's just an expression. I'm not really making friends with the tree," he scoffed. "If anything, I'm about to give it a good reason to be mad at me." "I meant we can't set up camp here, hoping for a miracle, or a friendly passerby. I mean, what are the odds a good Samaritan would take the same shortcut we did?" I wasn't mean, but he was the one to discover this brilliant alternate route between highways over an hour ago, and in that time we hadn't seen a single car besides our own. Our path had been nothing but acre after acre of farmland and trees, and of course, that one enormous house back at the top of the hill. "All right," Jerry relented. What's the plan, then? Did you clock that spooky house we passed about a mile ago? He laughed. How could I not? It was so extra. He wasn't wrong. The place stuck out like a pink bikini at a Mormon funeral. Unlike the traditional farmhouses and double-wides that decorated most of our adventure through the back roads of the American South, this place was a certifiable mansion, a mix between Greek revival and Gothic architecture, including spires, columns, and even a widow's walk. I wouldn't have been surprised to see a gargoyle or two hanging out on the roof, and I would have bet my last dollar the place was haunted. One thing was for certain, it was the sort of place I'd love to avoid at all costs. I think we need to go there, I said regrettably. Jerry eagerly agreed. As he relieved himself by the side of the road, I went into the car's trunk and collected a few necessities for the walk up the hill. A bag of trail mix, bottle of water, some sunscreen. I wasn't expecting this to take very long, but not very long was exactly enough time for me to burn, and poor preparation had kicked my ass too many times lately. Jerry must have had a similar thought. He came up next to me and reached under our bags, pulling the baseball bat from its hiding place. What's that for? I asked. Protection. Duh. There could be wolves out there.
Damn it.
No, dude. No weapons. I don't want to show up at a stranger's house looking any more suspicious than we already do. Oh, good point. He tossed the bat inside and slammed the trunk shut. I thought we had everything we needed. I thought we were being smart by leaving the weapon behind. In retrospect, it was the first of many bad decisions. It took half an hour to get to the top of the hill. Another 5 minutes just to walk up the winding driveway through the meticulously manicured lawn. When we finally reached the enormous double doors, I was too exhausted to even feel nervous anymore. Jerry knocked while I fished, unsuccessfully, for cell reception. Who do you think lives here anyway? Jerry asked. Some kind of supervillain? King of the farmer folk? The monsters? If I had to guess, probably the kind of people whose family used to own the people.
Slaves.
The door opened, and I quickly remembered how to feel nervous again. Can I help you? The old woman croaked in a voice that sounded like paper tearing. She was a little over 4 feet tall and dressed like a Victorian-era doll, with gray hair tied back below a cloth bonnet, bristly nose hairs, skin the color of canned meat spread, and the thickest pair of wire-frame glasses I'd ever seen, magnifying her pupils to the size of quarters. To put it bluntly, she was difficult to look at. I nearly dropped my phone, but Jerry didn't even flinch. He just tipped an imaginary hat and said, Hello there, ma'am. My name is Jerry, and this is my associate, Jack. We hate to be a bother, but our vehicle broke down just up the street, and we were wondering if it might be possible to... I wasn't expecting any more company, she interrupted. Are you sure you have the right address? Jerry and I shared a look. No, ma'am, he said. I was just saying that our car stopped working out of the blue. We were stranded on the side of the road, and Jack is a nervous Nelly, so we decided... All the guests have been accounted for, she said, her voice registering somewhere between a creaking door and an angry drill sergeant. You must check your invitations, please. Jerry took a breath and rubbed his hands together. Is there someone younger we could talk to? Jerry, I snapped. Relax, dude. I didn't even think she could hear us. I pushed him out of the way, stepped up to the feeble old woman, and looked into her enormously magnified eyes. Excuse me, I said gently. We need to use your phone, please. She tilted her head up, then back down, presumably giving us both the once-over. Then she turned around and said, Follow me this way to the telephone machine. Local calls only, no long distance, please. As she disappeared into the bowels of the ancient manor, I hesitated. A familiar feeling washed over me, one I could neither trust nor ignore. A feeling of dread, and an unshakable sense that something was wrong here. Only this time, it felt stronger. It felt realer. Before I could comprehend what was happening, Jerry had already marched past me into the dark entryway, leaving me all alone with my paranoia. I took a breath and plowed ahead after him. The short, elderly woman spoke in a dry monotone as we followed her past the entryway into an enormous great hall that wouldn't have looked out of place on the first-class deck of the Titanic. I was only halfway listening, but I picked up enough to understand that she was reciting the house's history like some kind of tour guide. The home was built in 18-something-something by Colonel something-something. It began as a plantation, I knew it, and then served as a hospital during the Civil War, or as she worded it, the War of Northern Aggression. As her words droned on, the interior of the manor was busy telling its own story. The hardwood floors and century-old claw marks, the enormous painting hanging over the fireplace depicting a man with sideburns, I dare you to grimace. The suit of armor, bearskin rug, crystal chandelier. I half expected to see a diamond billboard sign reading, "We have old money, so fuck you." The air smelled of tobacco and old books. Voices, muffled from far away, transferred through the walls. There was a jovial nature to them, some laughter even. The place was alive with people. But at least that's what I hoped I was hearing. At the base of the grand staircase was a thin door. The woman opened it, revealing a much less impressive set of steps leading down into a basement. She descended, and Jerry followed. I considered the wisdom of staying put, keeping the exit in sight, just in case one of us needed to make a break for it. I looked over my shoulder to make sure the door was still there. Not that it would do much good. If things went south again, I knew I wouldn't make it very far on my own. When I turned towards the basement, it was already too late to tell them to stop or wait. I looked back at the exit. I was stranded. It's remarkable, really, that even with my attention being pulled in such opposite extremes, I somehow managed to notice the shelf of books against the wall by the fireplace. Even more remarkable, how I gravitated towards it, almost unwillingly. How time stood still, how I forgot where I was for only a moment, and in that moment, I must have pulled a book out and begun reading. It had been ages since I let myself relax and get lost in a good story. What the hell am I doing? Time whip snapped back into place around me. How long have I been standing here? I was already a chapter and a half in. I closed the book and inspected it. The basilisk stare. It was an Agatha Christie mystery that I'd never heard of before. Strange, I thought I'd already read everything she'd written. How did this one escape my radar? All at once, I became aware of an unsettling presence, a looming shadow. The same feeling you get when a cop car starts tailing you on the interstate. I put the book back where it belonged, then turned around and confirmed my suspicions. I was no longer alone here. The young woman was silently watching me. For how long, I didn't know, but I was willing to give her the benefit of the doubt, and say that she wasn't Edward Cullening me this entire time. She wore a light blue formal dress, one that could have been plucked straight from the 19th century, complete with a hoop skirt and white elbow-length gloves. She was about my age, assuming she wasn't a ghost or a vampire, of course, with piercing blue eyes and black hair and ringlets, framing a heart-shaped face. In her hand, she held an old book, the cover worn down enough to obscure the title. She didn't say anything. She didn't smile or nod. She just stood there, quietly staring. I thought this behavior was a little weird until I realized that I was guilty of the same thing. I managed to get out the words, "Oh," and "Hi," in that order. She turned her gaze momentarily to the bookshelf, then back to me. Her voice was barely more than a whisper. "You're like me, aren't you?" I didn't answer right away. I didn't know how to answer. Part of me deep down wanted to say yes, but I couldn't understand why. Instead, I tried, "What do you mean?" When she spoke again, her voice had a little more heft. "There's something wrong with you." The way she said it carried no malice. It was an innocent statement. I gave an honest response. "Yeah, how'd you know?" Her Her next question made the hairs on the back of my neck stand at attention. The weird stuff. Does it follow you too? I looked around to make sure that we were still alone before answering. I don't know yet. This way, please! The old woman had returned. Despite the word please, I could tell it was more of a command than a request. The girl with the piercing blue eyes stepped in front of me, shelved her book, and walked away without another word. This time when the old woman descended the stairs, I was quick to follow. The sooner we got a call into the mechanic, the sooner we could leave this place. Forever. The underground room smelled exactly how I expected an underground room to smell. Mostly damp. A single bare incandescent light bulb hung from the ceiling, illuminating our surroundings. A broken grandfather clock against the far wall, an industrial washer and dryer combo, cardboard boxes stacked to the ceiling, and an 8-foot-tall taxidermied polar bear that begged the question, how the hell did they get that thing down here in one piece? Jerry already had the receiver of the corded phone between his ear and shoulder when I walked in. His hands held a yellowed phone book. All right, thanks, buddy. Oh, yeah, you too. He looked at me with a strange expression. His mouth formed a smile, but his eyes were saying, "You're not gonna like what I have to tell you." "What is it?" I asked. He put the phone book on the table, cradled the receiver, took a breath, then answered slowly. "I've got good news and bad. You know I hate this game, right? The mechanic knows exactly where we are. He's sending his tow truck for a tow. But he won't be able to get to us till morning." "Then we try someone else." "Yeah, about that. He's the only mechanic in the entire county." "Oh? Did he tell you that?" "He's the only mechanic listed in the phone book." What? How's that even possible?" I stepped over to the table and picked up the book. It immediately opened to the page for the mechanics. If I wasn't so paranoid, I might not think anything about it. But the fact that it fell open directly to the exact spot I was looking for registered less as serendipity and more as a red flag being big enough to propel a sailboat. I sighed once I saw that he was right. Single entry under mechanics, automotive. I put the book away and said, "That's fine. We can just make it through one night in the car. We survived a lot worse. I nearly jumped out of my skin when the old woman began speaking. I honestly forgotten she was still there. If this is what must be, I will not begrudge any travelers the safety of shelter for one night. There is a spare room available on the 3rd floor. The Woodrow Harper Suite." "Oh, no," I said. "We couldn't possibly accept such an imposition." Jerry made a noise that sounded like a quack and said, Oh, yeah, we can. What are you talking about?" She insisted. "It's no problem at all. My family has long been blessed with the fruits of fortune. It is only right that we extend our hospitality to those in need. However, there is one condition upon which I must insist." "No, really," I said. "It's okay." "No, really," Jerry echoed. "Did you say sweet?" The bad feeling in my gut was growing stronger by the second. "Jerry, do you mind if I talk to you in private for a moment?" He followed me to the far corner, below the watchful eyes of that dust-covered bear. "I don't like it," I whispered. "There's something wrong here. Something about this place doesn't make sense." For a flash instant, I thought I saw something crawling up the wall next to us, but upon closer inspection, I realized that there was nothing there. My mind had a tendency to play tricks. Jerry didn't bother with the inside voice. "Yeah, I know. It's creepy as fuck. But Grandma over there hardly strikes me as a murder cannibal. I'm reasonably certain if push comes to shove, we can take her." I looked over my shoulder to see if Grandma had heard us. If she had, her face didn't show it. I turned back to Jerry and continued, "It's not her I'm worried about." "Well, what is it?" I took a second to try and find the answer, but realized I didn't know. Instead, I shrugged. "Hey, It's cool, Jerry said. If you're getting bad vibes, we can piece right out of here. But let me ask you this. If your gut's correct, if something is wrong, do you really think we'll be any safer waiting out in the car? He had a point. Whatever was triggering my nope radar could possibly follow us a mile down the road. But if we did go back to the Nissan, at least I could spend the night with a baseball bat in my hands. The old woman's patience must have finally run out. She turned to the stairs and called over her shoulder. Follow me this way. I'll show you to your room. Jerry read the look on my face and tried to pump the brakes. Actually, we're gonna rough it in the car tonight. No need to show us to any... Oh, okay. She's already gone. We hurried up the stairs behind her. When we'd all re-emerged on the ground floor, she started towards the grand staircase, but Jerry and I took a different route, heading straight for the front door. Just before I could reach the handle, the lights flickered and a booming noise filled the room, freezing us in place. The sound of a distant explosion lingered for a couple seconds, then dissipated. If I didn't know any better, I would have thought it sounded like thunder. I broke free from my deer in the headlights moment and opened the door to see that the sky outside had turned a murky black. Waves of thick, torrential rain rocked the trees on the horizon like hands, frantically waving goodbye to the world. I'd been through enough tornadoes to know what bad weather looked like, but this was something different. A bolt of lightning cracked open a tree on the other side of the road. A half a second later, the noise washed over us. I instinctively stepped back and shut the door. Jerry laughed. Guess that settles it, huh? Looks like we're bunkering down for the night, whether we like it or not. It appears the looming tempest has finally reached us. Once again, the old woman snuck up on me, only revealing her presence when she spoke. I turned to her. She showed no signs of concern. No smile or frown, no emotion at all, really. She just stood and waited for me to say something, which, after finally finding my voice again, I did. You said there was one condition to our staying the night? Yes, she answered. As you have undoubtedly discovered by now, this is no ordinary bed and breakfast. A typical reservation is made a full year in advance. Spending a night in bedside manner is quite valuable in more ways than one. If you will be present, I expect you to behave as legitimate guests. That means engaging in all the evening's activities, exploring the various mysteries, and staying in character. Above all else, she raised her voice to emphasize this next part, you must not let any of the other participants know that you did not pay for a room. Is that understood? Clear as mud, Jerry answered. Excellent. Please follow me to your accommodations. Her explanation was way too much for me to digest all at once. The activities, bed and breakfast, character? She was continuing to speak as we followed her up the grand staircase further from the safety of the outside. Bedside Manor contains 13 bedrooms, 5 for guests, 3 for family, and an additional 5 for the servants. At one point, it was considered quite progressive to allow the help to live within the main quarters, but Eustace Bedside saw it as an exercise in practicality. Keep your friends close and your workers closer. I hung back a few steps and caught Jerry at a safe whispering distance. That storm really came out of nowhere. It's a cloudburst, he said with a shrug. They happen. I got sunburnt walking up the hill. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. Good thing we got here when we did, huh? He wasn't taking the hint. Yeah, I said, resigning myself to the situation. Good thing. The old woman reached the top of the landing and waited silently for us to catch up. When we were together again, she continued the monologue, explaining the sordid history of the generations of bedsides, like it would somehow be relevant to the plot or something. I wasn't really paying attention. I just assumed Jerry was listening and could fill me in later. Before we knew it, we were standing beside a reddish-brown door with a mercury knob and a brass nameplate above the frame that read, Woodrow Harper, 1846, 1857. Do you have any questions for me at this time? She asked.
What's the Wi-Fi password?
Bedside Manor offers a full experience in the immersion of a simpler time. We have neither computers or television machines. Save for emergencies, the telephone will not be available to anyone during the course of their stay. I asked the next question. And what did you say your name was? My name is Margaret. Margaret Bedside. But you may call me Maggie. Thank you, Maggie. She offered us the key as well as a strange apology. I'm sorry. I'm afraid there's only one bed in Woodrow Harper's suite. I took the key and replied, that won't be a problem. She looked like there was something she wanted to say, but didn't. Instead, I'll leave you two to get cleaned up. Please, feel free to use any clothing you find in the armoire. Dinner begins at 7 sharp. There will be a chance for social mingling at 6. I expect to see you both there. With that, she turned and shuffled back towards the stairs. The room was, in a word, magnificent. There was a king-sized bed complete with its own curtains, a separate sitting area by the bookcase, even a crystal chandelier. I tried to keep a calm voice. Jerry, what is your understanding of the situation we find ourselves in right now?
Isn't it obvious?
Not at all.
Dude, check it out. This is one of those monster mystery-themed bed and breakfasts.
He could barely contain his excitement.
I've always wanted to try one of these.
Come again? He started exploring the room like a kid in a candy shop.
It's like an escape room mixed with a dinner theater. Here's what's going to happen. Someone's going to die tonight. And then we get to spend the weekend playing detective. The reason everything here looks and feels so creepy is by design. Old Maggie's probably just an actress. This is going to be awesome.
He rushed into the bathroom, then excitedly called out,
They got a bidet and toilet paper. How fancy do you feel right now? Because I'm feeling monocle fancy.
I approached the window overlooking the front of the property. At the rate the surprise storm was churning along, it couldn't have much longer to go. Eventually the sky would have to run out of water, right? You are aware that we can't stay here overnight, aren't you? We don't have any of our stuff. We don't have clothes. I left my medicine in the car. I can't afford to skip another dose. Not after what happened last time. I thought about the moment earlier at the bookshelf. About the lost time. And then I thought about the girl with the blue eyes. Jerry soon interrupted my train of thought, returning to the main room wearing a silken bathrobe around his neck like an oversized scarf.
Yeah, I haven't forgotten about that, he said. Tell you what, when the storm clears, maybe we can pull an Irish goodbye. But in the meantime, let's see if the wardrobe comes with its own complimentary Narnia portal.
He opened the double doors to the armoire, then took a step back and whistled. What is it?
Hey, Jack. What size suit do you wear?
I don't know. Medium. Why? I crossed the room to see that the piece of furniture held 2 complete tuxedo suits, with formal wear, with tails and top hats, no thank you, shoes and bow ties. Exactly 2 sets. At a glance, they seemed like they would be pretty close to Jerry's and my sizes. The pull-out drawers beneath the suits contained socks and underwear. The bathroom contained 2 unopened toothbrushes. Jerry showered up first. When he was done, he tried on his clothes to find they fit perfectly. After my own shower, I wasn't even surprised that mine fit like every piece had been tailored specifically for me. Coincidences abound. But even Jerry had to admit that this one was a little too lucky. Everything about this room felt like someone had been expecting us. By 6 o'clock, the storm had barely waned. If this went on for much longer, my Nissan would be underwater before we could get back to it. On the hour, jazzy instrumental music began wafting up from the first floor, an old-timey phonograph drawing us all together to the great hall of the night's mandatory socializing. An older man with a walrus mustache and gold-rimmed steampunk sunglasses sat in a leather armchair by the roaring fireplace, the tumbler of amber liquid in one hand. He paid us no mind as we reached the bottom of the stairs. A bevy of voices drew my attention to where a pair of wall-sized pocket doors had been opened, expanding the great hall into an adjacent room, a parlor big enough to dance in, were one so inclined. I whispered to Jerry, "All right, before we get started, I want to make sure we're on the same page. We don't know what to expect, and we're not supposed to be here. I think we need to tread lightly."
Like a slug in a salt mine. Got it.
I almost believed him, until he smacked me on the chest and exclaimed,
"Hey, they got booze! My favorite liquid!"
With that, he went straight for the pocket doors. I tailed as best I could. Leaving the great hall for the parlor felt like stepping into a different world. Judging by the decor, this was either a ladies' parlor or the room where they put children when they got too excited. The furniture standing in stark contrast to the deep mahogany of the previous room was pink and pastel. The ceiling was painted with a mural of clouds, terrifying cherubs. Every flat surface contained arrangements of dead or dying flower bouquets. It looked like it had been decorated by an alien with no concept of humanity who researched women on Wikipedia for 10 minutes before getting to work. As Jerry crossed the parlor to the spirits table below the life-size painting of a nude Venus, I took note of the other visitors. Everyone here was dressed to fit the time period, whatever that was supposed to be. The women had their hair in updos and wore voluminous skirts to exaggerate the proportions. The men were all in bespoke tuxedo suits. Honestly, male fashion hasn't changed that much in the last few centuries. A dark-haired boy of about 13 or 14 surveyed the bar from a safe distance, while a middle-aged woman with short gray hair kept a watchful eye on him. The couple, man and woman, stood in the corner of the parlor, making silly faces and taking selfies of the table statue of a baby with wings and horns. I made a mental note to avoid them for as long as possible, lest I be recruited to take photos. The girl was also there, the one with the black ringlets and eyes. She briefly looked our way when we first entered, then quickly pretended she hadn't. At her side was another woman, taller, probably a year or two older than me. They looked remarkably similar, though the older one's hair wasn't quite as dark, her eyes not as blue, and her skin not as pale, like they were made from the same ingredients but different recipes. It wouldn't be unreasonable to assume they were siblings. The older sister was the most anachronistic part of the evening, with black lipstick, a butterfly tattoo on her exposed collarbone, and a smartwatch cuffed around her wrist. When she noticed us, she immediately gave me the universal, "What the fuck are you looking at?" glare. Without asking, Jerry put a glass in my hand, then set to work pouring and mixing another. I brought the cup to my nose and took a whiff of something that smelled like jet fuel.
"So, what's our cover story?" he asked. "How about this? I'll be a fireman scientist and you can be an astronaut detective. Oh, or you can be a sexy fireman detective and I'll be the guy who invented jeggings."
I assumed we'd just tell the truth, more or less, leaving out certain details, of course.
"Oh, man, honesty is so boring, though. Haven't you ever wanted to be someone else for a night?"
I wasn't sure exactly how to answer, but I didn't get the chance. "Good evening, gentlemen." We both jumped. Somehow Maggie was there, standing directly behind us. Unless she teleported in place, I had no idea how she managed to sneak up on us yet again.
"Cheesy crust, lady!"
Jerry exclaimed, clutching his chest.
"Someone should put a bell around your neck."
She showed no reaction other than launching into another deadpan monologue. "I trust you are paying close attention. The social hour is the most important part of the evening's experience. This is your best chance for first impressions. Clues essential to solving the mystery of Bedside Manor may only appear once. You would both be wise to cooperate with your fellow investigators. Furthermore, I have it on good authority that not everyone here tonight is exactly who they claim to be. She cracked an unnatural smile. Besides yourselves, of course. Just as suddenly as she appeared, she slinked silently away, presumably to share the same message with the other participants. Once we were alone again, I asked, "What do you make of that?"
I don't know, Jerry said. But then again, I haven't really been following the narrative here. What exactly is the mystery of Bedside Manor?
I think maybe that's what we're supposed to find out. Like maybe the mystery is, what is the mystery?
A little too meta for my taste.
Jerry slammed his entire drink in one go, handed me the empty glass, burped, and then took the full one out of my hand.
Maybe the murder is supposed to happen before dinner. That's why she wanted us here, so that we're all suspects.
Well, that's silly. And how are we expected to be investigating the murder before it happens? The call to action isn't supposed to precede the inciting incident. The story frame is all out of whack, or maybe not. Maybe I just haven't been paying attention. Honestly, real life has gotten so strange lately that it's made fiction obsolete. Jerry sipped his drink, smacked his lips, and said,
I stand corrected. That's a little too meta for my taste.
I waved at the room with my empty glass. You don't find any of this weird or suspicious?
Everything is weird and suspicious. That's what makes it fun. Look, I know you're nervous. I know you're used to situations getting out of hand real fast, but we're on vacation. All of this is behind us. Let's just go mingle with the nerds who actually paid for the murder mystery package, pretend we're normal 1800s aristocracy or whatever, eat the rich people food, drink the rich people booze, and have a good time. If shit hits the fan, we take our free suits and duck out.
Damn. He didn't realize it, but Jerry just slipped up and showed his hand. This trip may have ostensibly been about my own mental health. But he was right. We were on vacation here. I spent so much time on high alert waiting for the next shoe to drop that I completely overlooked the fact that Jerry had experienced his own fair share of tragedy. When our friends died, when nobody would believe what really happened, when we had to swallow the official cover-up, he was right there with me every step of the way. Maybe I was being a little selfish, overreacting to a few ominous coincidences. And maybe Jerry had the right idea. After all, what would panicking do? All the way out here where nobody could help us or even hear us scream. Okay, I said. I'll try and dial back the paranoia a couple of notches, but can you please promise me one thing?
Sure. Anything. What is it?
Don't leave me alone tonight, okay?
Okay. I promise.
Hello, gentlemen, greeted the man as he approached. He was one half of the selfie couple, tall and well-built with some light scruff around his smile. His blonde hair was combed back into a sort of mullet style that surprisingly did not work for him. He offered his hand, the one that wasn't holding an empty glass, and introduced himself. Tobias Kincaid. I shook his hand. Jack. But that's my real name. I don't know if we're supposed to be in character for this part, or... Tobias is my real name. Blame my parents. Jerry took his hand next and curtsied.
Jeremiah Cumberbatch, oil prospector and saloon salesman at your service.
Tobias gave him a friendly laugh. You know, I've never actually done one of these things before. I'm not exactly sure of the etiquette. All I know is that I'm glad there's an open bar. He spoke with the air and confidence of a politician at a fundraiser, the kind of cool guy sang-froid that I could only dream about. His other half, a slim woman with long red hair and green eyes, came up behind Tobias, put an arm around his waist, and planted a kiss on his cheek. Who are your new friends? She asked in a voice that contained a faint accent I couldn't place. Gentlemen, this is my wife, Bridget. She flashed us a perfect supermodel smile and candid. How do you do? Bridget, meet Jack and Jeremiah. Jerry launched into a greeting with a strange accent of his own.
Well met, my lady, if it doth please the court. Call me Jerry, by Jove, 'tis a lovely party, tisn't it?
I attempted to nip this in the bud before he gave everyone a tension headache. Jerry, you don't have to do the old-timey voice. Nobody else is doing it.
Doesn't it? Egads, governor.
But now you're doing Cockney? Bridget laughed politely and said to her husband, "It looks like you may have finally found someone to indulge in your vice alongside you." Jerry was quick to respond.
I don't know what you're talking about, but consider me very interested.
Tobias poured himself a glass of scotch, took a sip, and said, "As fortune would have it, our suite came with a complimentary box of Montrisco No. 3s. Rarely does life afford us a rainstorm. Fine scotch, good company, and quality cigars all in the same time. It would be a pity to waste such an opportunity. Can I tempt either of you to join me for a smoke?" Jerry made a face like he was literally in active pain as he said,
I would love to. But as misfortune would have it, I recently quit smoking tobacco.
"Oh," Tobias said. "You traded your addiction for chewing tobacco. Seems like a lateral move." I answered him. "You picked up on the emphasis on the wrong word there." "I see," said Tobias with a nod. "How unfortunate." Jerry squinted and asked,
You're not a cop, are you, Tobias?
Tobias and Bridget shared a hearty laugh. Man, this couple really liked laughing. No, nothing like that. Just a boring old research consultant." Jerry turned to Bridget.
What about you?
"No," she replied. "Just a boring old housewife." "Well, gentlemen," Tobias said, holding up his glass, "here's a toast to new friends." The four of us clinked our glasses. Jerry and Tobias drank while Bridget and I watched. Shortly after, the couple excused themselves. Jerry stared hard as they walked away.
Man, he said, those two are absolutely freaking gorgeous.
"They were also lying," I said. I couldn't explain how or why, but I knew they were hiding something. Jerry didn't seem to hear me.
It sucks that the beautiful ones are always taken. You know, the concept of monogamy was created and perpetuated by the ruling class as a means for societal control. If humanity were to...
I'm sure he was about to say something that he thought was deep and or philosophical, but thankfully fate sent us an interruption. As Bridget went to speak with a woman with short hair, Tobias branched off towards the great hall. The young boy, the one who'd been wallflowering under his mother's gaze, took the opportunity to slip away, bumping into Tobias in the process. It was quick, but not quick enough to escape our notice. The kid just lifted Tobias's wallet, like a pro. Jerry took a step forward. "Wait," I said. "What happened to Salt in the slug mine? We don't want to cause a scene here."
It's cool, dude. I'll be subtle as fuck.
I had absolutely no desire to see what subtle as fuck looked like in practice. As soon as he marched in, I fell back and looked for a shadow to fade into until the whole thing blew over. Maybe we'll get lucky, I thought. Maybe Jerry will say or do something just embarrassing enough that we can use it as an excuse to leave the party early. But not embarrassing enough to get us kicked out into the rain. I blinked. Where the hell am I? In front of me, I saw the bookshelf. That's when I realized that I'd done it again. I'd zoned out. I lost time. I had to face facts. This was starting to become a pattern. My doctor was so optimistic that we'd finally nailed down the perfect prescription cocktail to keep my brain on track. I pulled up my phone to assess the damage. 6:15. Nothing too bad, just a few minutes. Surely I couldn't have gotten into too much trouble in that little time. I let myself relax, looked back at the parlor, and tried to retrace my steps. I must have come out here to get away from all the people. I turned back to the shelf of books and noticed one right away. The one with the faded cover. The same book the girl with the blue eyes had been reading. I pulled it out, flipped it open to the first page, and read the title. The Mansion of by H.P. Lovecraft. Strange, I thought. I'd never heard of this one before, and I was certain I'd already read everything Lovecraft had written. Something scurried between my feet. I looked down, but it was gone and nowhere to be seen. Well, don't just stand there. Come over and sit a spell. The voice came from an older gentleman with a walrus mustache. He was seated in the leather armchair by the fireplace, smiling in my direction. I looked around, hoping he may have been referring to someone else, but there was only me in proximity. Sorry, I said. Don't be afraid, he laughed. The flames dancing in the reflection of his sunglasses gave the impression of a fiery-eyed demon. He showed teeth, then added, I don't bite. With some hesitation, I put the book back where it belonged, walked over, and took the armchair opposite his. This was inevitably going to be an awkward conversation. I've always found small talk to be like running through wet sand, exhausting, and in most cases, completely unnecessary. Hi, I said. That sure is a nice fire, huh? He smiled in silence, giving me nothing to work with. My name's Jack. Nathaniel Pennyworth Chumley III, at your service. I knew you were there. I could hear you walking over. Tell me, is there something of interest on that side of the room? With the ivory cane that had been resting in his lap, he pointed at the bookcase. That was the moment I realized the man's sunglasses weren't strictly a stylistic accessory. Mr. Chumley, it seemed, was blind. Just a bunch of books. Nothing you'd be interested in. I regretted the words as soon as I heard them come out of my mouth. I see, Nathaniel Pennyworth Chumley III said with a hearty chuckle. And what about over there? He pointed back towards the parlor. Is there anything in that direction worth experiencing? Help a poor old man out, would you? Describe what I'm missing. Well, there's a bunch of people. People? How exciting. Young people. Or just more old folks like me. Well, there's Maggie bedside, who I assume you've met. He grunted in affirmation. Then there's also a mother here with her son, about 13 or so. There's this married couple. The wife is a redhead. The husband looks like MacGyver. Not that you know what MacGyver looks like. Never mind. There's also my idiot genius roommate, Jerry, and two sisters close to my age. Wow, he said. And not one of those people strike you as more worthy of your attention than that shelf of books. It's true what they say. Youth is wasted on the young. I wasn't expecting a soft lecture tonight. I squirmed in my seat and took a stab at defending myself, though I resented the fact that I would even have to. I've never been good at socializing. Truth be told, I'd rather stand in a corner alone than engage in meaningless conversations with people I don't even know or care about. Again, I regretted the words a moment too late. I hadn't meant to be so honest. He furrowed his brow, and I quickly backtracked. Which is to say, I never know how to talk to strangers. Oh yes, better. That was exactly the right amount of honesty. What does a polar bear weigh? Excuse me? I asked you a question. What does a polar bear weigh? I searched my memory for context and did some quick math. I guess in the neighborhood of 450 pounds. He chuckled jovially. Enough to break the ice, Jack. What? That's what you say when you want to start a conversation. Now why don't you go and try it out with the girl? Which one? The one staring at you right now. I turned to see the girl with blue eyes watching from across the parlor. This time it was me who turned away first. How did you know she was looking over here? Some things are so obvious. You don't need eyes to see them. He smiled suspiciously. Wait, no. That answer doesn't make any sense at all. Seriously, I'm supposed to believe that you could hear her staring from the other room? No, I'm gonna need you to explain yourself. Anyway, that's what I wanted to say, but instead I shook my head for no good reason and said, oh, okay. Mr. Chumley III held out his empty glass. I hate to be a bother, but could I trouble you for one more favor? Sure, I said, standing up and taking his tumbler. Brandy, if you don't mind. I'll be back. Frankly, I was happy to have a task. Anything to get me out of having to talk to strangers. Hi! The mother said suddenly, stepping into my path the moment I passed the pocket doors. My name is Hope. Oh God, this is getting ridiculous. Did I die and go to hell? Is this my eternal punishment? Hey, I said awkwardly. Do you know how much a bear weighs? I'm not sure. 2 tons? Oh my God, that would be horrible. Is that riddle part of the game? She looked almost as flustered as I felt. I'm sorry, I've never actually done one of these murder mystery parties before. She reached out and put her hand on my arm like we were somehow already acquainted enough to be on a touching basis. No, it was... Never mind. I took a half step back to let her hand fall off me. What's up, Hope? I wanted to ask you for your help. See, I'm here with my son, Wolfgang. He's a very bright boy, extremely talented, but he isn't the most outgoing. He's had a hard time making friends back home, and I was thinking maybe this weekend would give him a chance to come out of his shell. She raised a glass to her lips and took a large swallow. She was full of nervous energy. Like a squirrel in a dog park, constantly looking back to the corner of the room where the boy was now sitting by himself. I was still trying to think of a tactful way to tell her I wasn't a good fit for a babysitter, but she started talking again. That other gentleman you were with, is he your... She blinked several times before finishing the question. Brother? Yeah, something like that. She laughed like someone had just made a joke, leaned forward to put her hand back on my arm and said, oh, good, I wanted to make sure I want my boy to see some normal adults that he can look up to. I can assure you, we are not normal. Hell, we're barely even adults. She laughed even harder and squeezed my arm. You're so funny. What'd you say your name was? Jack. Her eyes widened. Then she dropped a nuclear bomb at my feet. Oh, Jack Townsend, right? I've been looking for you. I gripped the glass in my hand and prepared to use it as a weapon. This was an all-hands-on-deck 5-alarm freak all the way out emergency. I could feel it. Something bad was about to happen, and I needed to focus on not letting the panic attack swelling up in my chest overwhelm my senses. I swallowed the festering terror before it could breach the surface, put on a smile, and said in my calmest voice I could muster, how did you know my last name? Evidently my normal act was passable enough. She took another sip of her drink and explained, I have one of your bags in my room. Wolfgang and I were walking the grounds earlier, and when we returned, it was there, sitting by the bed, a backpack full of clothes. I hope you don't mind that I went through it. I promise. We were just looking for some kind of identification. There were some prescription bottles with the name Jack Townsend. I assume the servants, they must have delivered one of the wrong other guests' luggage to our room by mistake. She covered her mouth and said, oh, that's okay for us to say, right, servants? I mean, that's what they are after all. I mean, I never know what I'm allowed to say these days. Excuse me, I said, as I rushed past her, scanning the room for Jerry. I had all the evidence I needed now. It wasn't just a feeling anymore. Something wasn't right. I didn't know what or how or who or why, but I knew this was a situation, and we were much better off not in a situation. It was time for us to go, to duck out, to pull an Irish goodbye. But Jerry, like my sense of calm, was nowhere to be found. Where the hell did he go? I told him not to leave me alone. Maybe someone already got to him, and I'm next. I tried to shake the thought out of my head. I needed to focus. He went to get a good seat at the dinner table. Yeah, sure. That sounded like something Jerry would do. There was a doorway on the other side of the parlor that I assumed would lead to the dining room. I dropped Nathaniel's glass off next to a bouquet of half-dead flowers, went through the door, and immediately realized that I had made a mistake. I was in a hallway now. At least, hallway was the best word I could think of to describe it. The space didn't go anywhere specific, just a long, narrow, straight corridor as far as I could see. Something about the pattern of lime green and purple wallpaper, an upward slope of the checkered floor created an optical illusion when I looked at it for too long, giving the impression that the space went on forever, leading nowhere. It made me dizzy. This house was impossible. If Jerry went off on his own, there's no telling. Holy shit! The girl with the blue eyes. She was right here, next to me, with the same intense look on her face. Who was she? A character? A guest? A ghost? Was she even real? What? I exclaimed. You're not supposed to be here, she whispered. What, you mean like in this hallway? Is that even what this is? A hallway? She said it slower. No, I mean, you're not supposed to be here, Jack. Her face told me that she was being serious.
You're open.
Yeah, I know. Where do you think you go when you're not here? Amazingly, I understood her question. She was referring to my episodes. The lost time. Those moments when I lose my connection with my body. I've wondered the same thing. Where do I go when I'm not in my body? And more importantly, who's running the show when I'm not here? I understood the question, yet I couldn't understand how I understood her question. I couldn't understand how Claire knew to ask the question in the first place. Do we know each other? I asked. Have we met before? Claire shook her head. No. But this place is going to bring out the worst in you, she warned. I almost introduced myself, but then I remembered how she already used my name. Then I realized somehow I already knew hers. Claire and I must have talked earlier, and how else did she know all these things about me? How did I know that she lost both her parents in a terrible accident almost a year ago? That she hated the cold as much as I did? That she was scared even if she didn't let it show? They're watching us, she said. They're studying. An urgent voice called from the parlor. Claire? Claire, where are you? A moment later, the girl with the butterfly tattoo rushed through the doorway. She stopped when she saw us. Oh, she said, casting a distrustful look upon me. Is everything okay out here? I waited for Claire to answer, but she didn't say anything. She didn't even acknowledge the other person in the hallway with us. Eventually, I cleared my throat and tried to defuse the situation. Yeah, everything's fine. We're just talking. They were both staring at me now. The older one's eyes felt like daggers. I tried a different tactic. Do either of you guys know how much a polar bear weighs? The girl with the butterfly tattoo grabbed Claire by the shoulder and turned her so they were both facing one another. In a soft voice, she said, Claire, will you please go back to the party? I'll be right there, okay? Claire didn't answer. Or at least, she didn't answer her. She turned back to me and said, follow the smoke. With that, she shuffled back into the parlor, leaving me alone with the older sister. Hi, I said. Jack. Lauren. She had the aura of a shark who smelled blood. Nice to meet you, Lauren. No, it isn't. Lauren crossed her arms. Are you a vegetarian, Jack? No. Good. Before I could process what was happening, Lauren had already grabbed my shoulder, pulled me towards her, and put a cold knife against my cheek. Now listen here, you little shit. If you bother my sister again, I swear to Christ, I'll cut off your dick and feed it to you, understand? I thought carefully about my answer, eventually setting on a non-threatening, yes, ma'am. She held the weapon there for a tiny eternity before releasing her grip and lowering the blade. I stayed perfectly still as she stepped backwards. She never looked away from me as she folded up the butterfly knife with a well-rehearsed flourish, slid it back into her glove, and put a finger to her lips, and back through the doorway into the parlor. A second later, I remembered to breathe. Okay, I thought. That was definitely not part of the game. The only other place I could think to look for Jerry was our room. I kept my eyes down as I cut through the parlor and great hall. As far as I was concerned, there was no reason to talk to any of these people ever again. I'd socialized enough for one day. Before I reached the base of the grand staircase, I noticed that the air smelled like sweet tobacco smoke. I soon realized that the smell was coming from the front door. Now that I didn't have a blade against my face, I could see the situation in front of me with much more clarity. It was obvious where Jerry had disappeared to. All I had to do was follow the smell of smoke. I pushed open the front door right as another crack of lightning filled the night sky. The thunder ended, followed by a guilty-sounding, "Hey, buddy." It was Jerry. He and Tobias looked back at me from the porch railing, both equipped with lit cigars and half-empty glasses. Jerry held up his Monte Cristo number 3 and said,
"It's not what it looks like."
"I don't care,"
"Really?"
he said, raising an eyebrow.
"I think you do."
"Well, I don't."
"You do a little."
"Nope."
"Okay. Agree to disagree then."
"You said you weren't going to leave me alone."
"I did say that. But then T-Bone here dropped his wallet. I had to come and give it back to him."
"Oh, T-Bone dropped his wallet, did he?" Tobias flicked his ash over the railing and said, "It must have fallen out of my jacket pocket." I was already over this conversation. "Tobias, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I need a moment alone with Jerry." "Sure, go ahead, I'll stay out here." "Actually, we're gonna need the patio to ourselves." He sipped his drink, darted his eyes back and forth between Jerry and me, and then said, "Is this something time-sensitive? I'm only asking because I just lit this and..." I switched tactics. "Your wife's looking for you, Tobias." "Bridget's looking for me? Why?" "She spilled jam on her dress." "Jam?" Tobias asked incredulously. "Yep," I confirmed. "Jam. All over her dress. Just... all over it." "I didn't even know they had jam in there." "Well, they don't anymore." "So you're saying, just so I understand the situation, that not only Bridget spilled jam on her dress, but somehow managed to spill the entire party's supply of jam on her dress."
"Geez, what is this guy, the jam police?"
Jerry cleared his throat abruptly. It sounded an awful lot like a snicker he couldn't hold back. "Look, dude, I don't want to tell you, but I promise I will never lie about something like this. Your wife was devastated. She was crying and everything. Asked me to go find you." He cocked his head slightly and gave me a long, uncomfortable glare until Jerry stepped in.
"Don't worry, T-Bone," he said. "I'll keep your cigar warm for you."
Bias. "Okay, I guess I'd better go make sure everything's all right." With that, he handed Jerry his cigar and walked past me. The moment the door closed, Jerry asked,
"Do you think I look good with a mullet?"
"No, of course not. Shut up for a second and listen. I have a very serious question. Is there any chance you somehow orchestrated all of this as an extremely elaborate hoax just to give me a perverted sense of misadventure? Because if that's the case, I really appreciate the impressive effort. I would like to opt out now."
"No. But damn, that would have been a good idea. I have to remember it for your birthday."
"Please don't. We need to leave. Pronto." He carefully placed Tobias' cigarette next to his own in the ashtray on the table by the railing. He didn't have nearly the appropriate sense of urgency. With a smirk, he asked,
"Did something ominous just happen?"
"The lady with the kleptomaniac twin son knows my name. She said my luggage showed up in her room."
"Well, that's convenient. And also quite alarming. Thank you for confiding in me."
"Jerry, listen! While we were getting ready, somebody went out in the rain, found our car, broke in, packed a mother-flippin' bag, and brought it back to the manor. Why would anyone do something like that?" He leaned against the railing, put on his thinking face, and mulled it over for a few seconds before responding.
"Must be because you said you needed your medication in order to stay the night. So, that means two things. First, someone must not want us to have any reason to leave here tonight. And second, someone was watching us."
"Great. Our room is bugged. I guess I can assume they have videos of me in the shower."
"Oh,
Jerry's eyes got alarmingly wide. "What?
I think I know what's going on here.
What?
Yeah, that's definitely it.
What?
You're not gonna like it."
What?" He cleared his throat. looking me dead in the eyes, and said, "I think we just stumbled into a sex cult." I waited for a moment as to not sound like a broken record, and then, "What?"
Think about it.
"I will do no such thing, and you can't make me." He lifted the glass to his mouth, but I slapped it out of his hand before he could take another drink. It shattered against the porch.
Hey.
He snapped. "That could be poison for all we know."
Oh, yeah, he laughed. Now that you mention it, it probably is.
"Well, what are you waiting for? Let's go."
Okay, yes. But, no.
"Jerry, I'm not playing around. I've seen this movie. I know how it ends. If we go back inside..."
I hear you. Well, let's think this through.
His voice was annoyingly calm and level.
First of all, we can't leave without your medicine. And I think they know that. Oh, they probably want to use you as some kind of virgin sacrifice to a Norse fertility god.
Why would they?
Additionally, you and I probably aren't the only strangers in a strange land, if you know what I mean. There are the other guests. Either they're all complicit in the grand strategy to keep us here.
He was making a lot of sense, and I hated it. I let out a frustrated sigh, then finished the thought. Or their victims we're abandoning if we left right now.
We just need a plan. Here's what I think we do. One of us goes and causes a distraction in the parlor, preferably fire-related, while the other sneaks downstairs to the basement, uses the phone to call for help.
That's the plan? I denied my apprehension, nor did I feel the need to try. Split up, gang?
Split up, gang. Split up, gang.
She looked around and then said, "Oh, I
Gang, gang.
He's out here. Have either of you seen him?" I searched for a good lie, but all I could come up with was, "Tobias spilt jam all over his trousers, just all over him. He went to your room to change." She narrowed her eyes at me, slowly backed into the house, and closed the door. That was a close one.
You so fucking lying.
As usual, the least bad plan we could come up with was still pretty damn bad. Dividing up tasks was easy. While I'm rarely the easiest person in the room, distractions were undeniably Jerry's bread and butter. I never count on everything going according to plan, but I was still surprised by just how quickly things went off the rails. As soon as we shut the front door behind us, Maggie popped up out of nowhere to say the dinner was ready and our presence was required. She then herded us into the dining room, where the rest of the guests were gathered around a long wooden table, chatting, laughing, and enjoying their drinks. The immediate silence that occurred when we entered may as well have been accompanied by a record scratch to a stop. Jerry whispered,
"Is it just me, or do things feel a little hostile right now?"
Tobias and Bridget had the oh-so-unique look of, "Why did you lie to me about the jam?" on their faces. Just all over their faces. Hope shook her head and folded her arms at the annoying guy who rudely walked away from her mid-sentence. Lauren made a subtle but threatening gesture of running her thumb across her neck. Even old man Nathaniel What's-His-Name III had turned to face us, making a toasting gesture with a glass of brandy that someone else must have gotten him after I said that I would and bailed. That's when it occurred to me that I had already managed to piss off every other group here. Maggie stood in the doorway as we took our spots at the dinner table. Jerry sat to my right, protecting me from the blind man. Sat to my left, protecting Claire from me. The rest of the group took the other side, with Wolfgang my direct opposite.
Wolfgang.
Nobody took the empty seat at the head of the table. I was still trying to work out how we were going to cause a distraction when Jerry made things weird.
"Before we begin,"
He announced, pushing back his seat and standing up,
"I believe it would be a good idea to say a few words of grace to our Lord and Savior."
He'll
"I
say
beg your
him.
pardon," said Maggie.
"My pardon I grant thee," he replied with a wave of his hand. "And now, if you would all be so kind as to close your eyes and bow into your heads, I will deliver the most amazing prayer of thanks this side of the PCAD conversion."
With Wolfgang my direct opposite. Nobody took the empty seat at the head of the table. I was still trying to work out how we were going to cause a distraction when Jerry made things weird.
"Before we begin,"
He announced, pushing back his seat and standing up,
"I believe it would be a good idea to say a few words of grace to our Lord and Savior."
"I beg your pardon," said Maggie.
My pardon I grant thee,
He replied with a wave of his hand.
and now, if you would all be so kind as to close your eyes and bow to your heads, I will deliver the most amazing prayer of thanks this side of the BCAD conversion.
After a few uncomfortable seconds had passed, he repeated himself a little louder and more forcefully.
Please close your eyes and bow your heads.
Everyone else reluctantly followed his command. Everyone but me. I held out my hand and mouthed the words, "What the fuck?" He began speaking, or praying, while gesturing wildly at the door.
Dearest Lord, hi, it's me, Jerry. We met at Vassar College. That one time I did too many psychedelics and you told me birds weren't real. Anyway, I know it's been a while since we last spake. Sorry about that. Things have been wild. We come to you today to thank you for this presumably delicious meal we're about to chow up. But first, I'd like to spend a moment catching up.
It finally hit me. Nobody was looking. This was the distraction. I carefully scooted my chair back and pushed myself to my feet. I'd have to sneak around a few people, but barring a stumble or surprise sneeze, this was totally doable. Knowing Jerry, he'd had everyone singing along to Amazing Grace by the time I made my call to the local police and got back to the table. I tried to tune him out while focusing on my escape, but some of his words still broke through.
Because when you think about it, that's what tattoos are for. But I digress. We come to you today to thank you for the food and drink. And also, to thank you for this wonderful lodging and the company we have here today. And now the chairs, that table, and the rest of the furniture.
And I held my breath as I stepped past Lauren. She was the one I was most afraid of, but her head was down and eyes closed like all the others. As soon as I thought I was out of the woods, a hand popped out blocking my path. It was Claire's, and it was holding a folded note. The side facing me read, "Jack." I hesitated.
And when we think of the food we're about to put inside us, we are all reminded of the struggles of Jesus and what he went through when he gave up sex for 40 days. I once tried to go 40 days without cupcakes. Didn't even make it a week. It was weird, because I actually despise cupcakes.
Claire flicked the note twice. Her eyes were closed, but I knew she knew I was here. There was no point pretending. I reached down and took the paper from her fingers. She quickly retracted her hand, putting it against her other in the sign of the prayer in front of her face. This was no time to stop and read. I kept on walking. The door was right there. Maggie stood in front of it, face aimed down at her feet, eyes pressed shut. I could sneak past her, but I couldn't rush it if I didn't want to be noticed. I had to focus on not making a sound.
And the Plesiosaurus, and the Helicopridian, and let us not forget the Gigantoraptor. Anyway, in conclusion, thanks again for wiping out so many other apex predators before we got here.
Holy shit.
The building reverberated like the inside of a bass drum after getting hit by a comet. The lights went out, plunging us into total darkness and presumably ending Jerry's prayer. And there was a few gasps, a nervous laugh, a chair scraping against the floor as someone hurried to their feet. I turned around facing the direction of the table, just in time for one of the guests to slam into my shoulder as they rushed past.
Can someone tell me what just happened?
Nathaniel called out.
That sounded like thunder.
Jerry responded.
Lights went out.
Nathaniel raised his voice in a command.
Everyone stay calm, stay put. I'm sure our host has some candles or a torch.
A short, silent moment passed. Then we heard the scream. A horrifying, blood-curdling, high-pitched squeal from the great hall, less than 5 steps away from me. Jerry chuckled and made a faux orchestral dun dun dun. The plan had gone off the rails again. I tried sneaking back to my seat through the darkness, but a tiny spotlight lit up the room, stopping me in my tracks. It was coming from Lauren's phone and pointed right at my eyes. "Where are you going?" she asked loudly enough for everyone to hear. I covered my eyes and stammered my way through a terribly unconvincing lie. "I wanted to go investigate that Scream. Oh. Were you moonwalking there? She asked. Looks like you're facing the wrong direction to be going towards the Scream.
Fucking bitch.
For some reason, Jerry took her side.
Yeah, Jack, why are you acting so suspiciously?
Look, I said, it was dark, okay? I must have gotten turned around. The house lights flickered back to life. Tobias and Bridget clapped, but only Jerry joined them. Everyone seemed confused on multiple levels. I assume the lights are back, Nathaniel stated. Jerry turned to him and asked,
How do you know that?
I gathered as much from your applause. Oh, was that why we were clapping? I was wondering. Lauren cleared her throat again. Well, what are we supposed to do now? Hope's soft voice crept into the group conversation. Hey guys, where did Miss Maggie go? I looked around and discovered the old woman had pulled her surprise sneak up on you act again, only in reverse this time. Jerry made eye contact with me, pushed back his chair and announced,
We'll go check it out, right, Jack?
Why don't we all go? Lauren asked. There was something unnerving about her accusing eyes and sarcastic tone. After all, there's safety in numbers, right, Jack? Yeah, Tobias agreed, as he and Bridget pushed out their chairs. Let's all go and see what the commotion was. Then maybe we could finally eat. I'm starving. The commotion, it seemed, was the foretold murder. The victim was lying face down in the great hall. Poor old Maggie had been done in during the brief blackout. Wouldn't take a master detective to conclude that her untimely demise had something to do with a large kitchen knife protruding from the center of her back. But the perpetrator of the crime was anyone's guess. Jerry put his hands on his cheeks and wailed out a pretend distress. Oh no! Not Maggie! Nathaniel was the last person to enter the room, tapping the floor in front of him as he walked. Did something happen? He asked. Lauren answered casually. Our hostess was murdered. I'm pretty sure Jack did it. What? I tried not to sound too defensive. Why me? Bridget laughed and added, I'm sorry, Jack. No offense, but it really looks like you're busted. Tobias raised his hand and said, I'd also like to cast my vote for Jack.
Oh.
No, hang on. Nathaniel interrupted. Let's not jump to conclusions. Surely, if a murder occurred, there'd be clues here to provide the killer's guilt. We all just need to take a moment and investigate our surroundings. The others reluctantly began searching the area, giving me an opportunity to finally sneak away. Tobias and Bridget were hand in hand, looking at paintings as I passed. Lauren and Claire inspecting the suit of armor. Hope was talking to Nathaniel while Wolfgang played with a fire poker. Before I could reach the door next to the basement, Jerry called out my name. I turned to see him waving me over, crouched next to the of our fallen hostess. I have to admit, she was doing a terrific job of playing dead. I couldn't even see her breathing. I crossed the room and knelt down next to him. Yeah? His voice was low, his eyes fixed on the hilt of the dagger. First of all, I want to apologize. I didn't like the sudden, serious timbre of his voice. Okay. For what? I guess a lot of things. Sorry I didn't listen. Sorry we didn't get out of here when you said we should. Sorry I dragged you along on this road trip. I was surprised he was saying all this right in front of old Maggie. I knew she was hard of hearing, but still. Hope called out to us from the other side of the room. Remember, if you find any clues, you're supposed to share with the group. Bridget called back. We found something! There's a series of numbers on the frames on each of the paintings. The crowd flowed over to join them. Jerry yelled out, We'll be right there! Then he dropped his volume to a whisper and said, You were right. I really did not like the sound of that. What's wrong? Maggie's dead. Yeah, I know. I have eyes and ears. She was probably killed. No. You don't understand. Maggie, her body is... How do I put this delicately? She's leaking. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and made a point to cherish this moment. The moment before things went bad. The moment before all hell broke loose. It was nice. But it was just that. A moment. And it was over all too soon. When I opened my eyes again, Jerry had a pained expression on his face.
Are you mad at me?
I looked down and noticed all the blood pooling around the body, some coming from the wound, some from her open mouth. Her eyes, magnified by the broken glasses, were enormous, focused on nothing. That depends, I said. Did you kill her?
No. Did you?
No. Are we certain that she's not just a world-class actress?
Hang on, let me check.
Jerry licked a finger, stuck it under the woman's glasses, and poked her exposed eyeball. When she didn't blink, he wiped his finger off on his jacket, and then said,
Yep, we're sure.
What are we supposed to do now?
I don't know. But the longer we go without saying anything, the weirder it's going to be when the rest of the group figures out why we were chilling next to a dead woman this whole time.
Maybe they won't have to find out.
Ah,
Jerry nodded.
I see.
A second passed, then,
Actually, I don't see.
we just need to get everyone out of here so we can move her to the basement and call the police. We'll let the authorities figure out the sex cult murder mystery for once. Jerry stood up, cleared his throat, and announced,
Jack and I have just found a clue. No, don't come over here. The clue says we should all go to our rooms and await further instructions.
The others stared back. Tobias stepped forward, saying, Can I see the clue?
No,
Jerry stated.
You're just gonna have to believe me on this one.
Why? Lauren asked. Jerry waved his hands in the air like he was conducting music.
All will be revealed in due time, I promise. But for now, we must go to our rooms.
Nathaniel responded, I feel as if we haven't yet found all the clues necessary to solving the mystery of Bedside Manor. Jerry needed some help. Unfortunately, I was the only one able to give it. I stood up, nearly lost my balance, but found it at the last possible second. I turned to the others, took a step forward, and said the first thing that came to mind. Look, everyone, I know you're probably... But then my foot didn't stop, like it was supposed to. Instead, it whipped out from under me, slipping in the puddle of blood. Before I knew it, I hit the ground, except that wasn't quite it. No, it was much worse. The others all screamed at once. Oh my God, are you okay? Shit! Whoa! I tried to play it off. Get back to my feet. Told them I was fine. The soft bag of garbage had broken my fall. Then I realized I'd actually slipped and fallen right on top of the dead body. The others surrounded us. Jerry pulled me to my feet and tried to calm everyone down.
Not to worry, this is all part of the act. Please go back to your room. There's nothing to see here.
Lauren shoved me out of the way as she and Bridget dropped to either side of Maggie, asking a lot of questions that they weren't going to get answers from. Are you okay? Are you hurt? Can you hear me? Maggie? Tobias put a hand on my shoulder and spun me around to face him. Is that blood on your shirt? Are you bleeding? Yes, I said. No, it's jam. Bridget gasped and covered her mouth. Didn't take them very long to figure it out. This is a pretty smart crowd, and we just lost control of the narrative. I had to try something, no matter how desperate. How much does a polar bear weigh? Unsurprisingly, that didn't work. Lauren jumped to her feet, grabbed Claire by the hand, and backed away a couple of steps before saying, She's dead. She's really, actually dead.
What?
Jerry tried.
No, she's not really. See, what had happened was...
He exhaled loudly and lowered his head.
Okay, yeah, she's really dead. I know this looks bad, but...
Hope screamed. The room erupted into chaos. People shouted over one another. Somehow I got knocked down again. I crab crawled away until my back was against the bookshelf. Everyone was arguing. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but Lauren and Tobias were both pointing at me, and I knew that wasn't a good sign. A loud, shrill whistle finally managed to shut everyone up. Nathaniel had everyone's undivided attention. Everyone, please calm down. Nobody was calm, but at least they were all silent, which was close enough. It seems that things have gotten quite out of hand. Before we bite out each other's throats, I'd appreciate some level-headed fact-finding. Bridget, are we sure Maggie is... Bridget grabbed her husband and said, Yes, she isn't breathing. She has no pulse. And that knife... Someone really stabbed her. Hope had her arms around her son. We know who it was, she shouted. It was that man, Jack Townsend. Me? I asked. He has a whole pharmacy stockpile worth of antipsychotics in his backpack. Clearly, he forgot to take his meds. Whoa! I yelled. Not that it's any of anyone's business, but I didn't forget to take my meds. I have an alarm set on my phone that always reminds me to take my meds because if I don't... Yeah, this isn't helping. I shut up a little too late. Tobias attempted to keep the peace. All right, let's all just stay calm. Maybe it was Jack. Maybe it wasn't. Either way, we need to call 911. Lauren was the first to say, my cell isn't getting any service. Next it was Bridget. Then Hope. Then Tobias. There is another phone, I said. It's in the basement, landline. Should be able to reach the outside. We'll go check it out, Tobias said. But first, we need to get everyone else together. If there's a killer on the loose, we can't let them pick us off one at a time. We'll go tell the workers, Lauren said, taking Claire and leaving before anyone else could argue. As soon as they were gone, Jerry walked over to my side.
Well, this has been fun,
he said, helping me back up.
Looks like you guys have this thing totally under control now. No reason for us to stick around. Ready to go, Jack?
Tobias stepped closer to us. And where exactly do you think you're going?
Anywhere but here, I mean. Jack's got this thing about murders he hates when they happen.
Bridget crossed her arms. I'm sorry, when this happens? Has this sort of thing happened to you before? Jerry laughed.
Yeah, once or twice.
Tobias narrowed his eyes. That's awfully suspicious.
I know, right? Which is exactly why we're gonna go before the police arrive. Otherwise, they're gonna think we had something to do with this.
I didn't want it to come to this, but if you insist. Tobias bent over, pulled up his pant leg, and retrieved a small handgun from the holster above his ankle. He kept it aimed at the ground for now, but the presence of the deadly weapon was all it took for his commands to gain a lot more authority. You're both going to stay right where you are until we figure this out.
A gun?
Jerry asked.
Really, T-Bone? After all we've been through? That's not very cash money of you.
I don't want to use it, but I can't just let a killer go free. Shoot them in the legs! Hope screamed, just to be safe. Lauren ran back into the room shouting, Guys! She froze at the sight of the weapon. Whoa! What's happening? It's okay, Tobias said. I have a concealed carry permit for this. Well, that's a relief, Lauren responded, generously. But before we start blasting away, we need to tell you something. What is it? Asked Hope. Claire wandered into the room behind her sister and announced, There's no one else here. What do you mean? Tobias asked. Lauren elaborated. There's no one else in the kitchen. No workers, no actors, no staff. There isn't even any food back there. We're all alone in this house. Hope, Bridget, and Tobias said it at the same time. What? That's not all, Lauren continued. There's something else you should know. Claire and I aren't even supposed to be here. Jerry and I shared a look. He asked,
What do you mean?
I mean, we're not really guests. Our car broke down this morning while we were passing by. The hairs on the back of my neck stood straight up. Oh my God, Hope exclaimed, clutching her chest. You're not going to believe this, but we're not supposed to be here either. We were on our way home when our car died right up the road. We had to walk here. Maggie said we could stay, but we had to pretend to be guests. This was one twist I did not see coming. Bridget grabbed her husband's arm and gave him a serious look. He nodded and said, Yeah, that's exactly what happened to us. My truck has less than 10,000 miles on it. There's no reason it should have stalled. We had to hike a couple of miles up the hill. The lady told us to mingle and fake like we belonged here. Jerry tisked and said,
Well, I, for one, am shocked. Here we are, paying full price, and they are just giving away rooms for free. I'll be telling Yelp about this.
I punched him in the shoulder and set the record straight. We're all in the same boat. Wait, said Hope. If none of us are really guests, then how did Nathaniel... We looked around and realized at the same time the blind man had evidently disappeared into thin air. Tobias was the one to say what we were all thinking. What the hell is going on here? As is usually the case for situations like these, the person with the gun became the de facto man in charge. I'll give him some credit. He started off okay. Our first course of action was a group field trip to the basement where Tobias put in a call to the local authorities. We were informed that, owing to the storm and our remote location, it would take an hour before anyone could reach us. That's when Tobias's leadership skills took a steep nosedive. In the end, he stole Jerry's original plan and told everyone to go wait in our rooms until the authorities arrived. With the allegedly blind man now on the wind, I had slipped to the number 2 spot in the group's most likely to be killer list. But that didn't mean they were ready to line up and do trust falls with me. Tobias kept a gun in hand as he chauffeured each of us to our rooms, instructing everyone to lock our doors and stay put. As Jerry wandered the suite looking for bugs, I sat at the edge of the bed trying to make sense of everything. But this puzzle was missing too many pieces. How could someone have orchestrated something like this? Why would they? Who killed the old woman? What's going to happen next? Those particular mysteries were way too abstract for my brain to find any foothold, but I had no trouble with this one. Why does Tobias want us to stay in our rooms? It made no sense. Tobias had demonstrated a certain degree of intelligence that would lead me to assume he knew why separating